Turn off your lights. Make sure your doors and windows are locked. Things are about to get spooky. Is It in the Corner of Your Eye? By No Conception 7327. You saw something, didn't you? You couldn't make out what it was, but it was in the corner of your eye. Follow these rules to survive. Number 1. Do not ignore it. The more you ignore it, the more it moves away from the corner to the center of your vision. Number 2. Look at its direction immediately. The longer you take, the closer it gets. Number 3. Avoid blinking when you see it. Blinking will increase the time it takes for you to look in its direction. Number 4. Do not rub your eyes. It's a trick to make you take longer to look at it. If your eye itches, take it as a sign that it's going to appear in a corner soon. Number 5. It doesn't matter when you start seeing it. It will go away at midnight. Number 6. After you survived it, report it to us on our helpline or our office when we're open. We'll take care of it. Number 7. If it reaches the center of your vision, we're sorry. The UDA. There's a rumor going around that our steam buns are filled with cat meat, which is just plain silly if you think about it. Why go through the trouble of chasing down something as agile as a cat when children are much easier to catch and taste so much better? Ways of the Isle by Verrgasm. Upon our vessel's arrival on the shores of far-flung Isle of Shejna, we were greeted by nothing but a desolate stretch of bone-white sand reaching as far as the eye could see in either direction. There were no warm welcomes uttered by parties of kind and lighted natives as I had expected and dearly hoped for. No crustaceans crawling its barren surface, and no birds flew overhead. Even the wind, which had so violently shook us to the point of near disaster not but an hour before, refused to make its presence known. I signaled to the small crew that this was perfectly typical in such an obscure land, but in truth my mouth lay agape just as theirs was, although I did a decent enough job of hiding it from them. The previous investigations, spanning those last 4 excruciating years, had finally led me there, to the hidden Shizna Islands, accessible only through an extremely precise, treacherous, and laborious route, nestled deep in the treacherous bowels of the North Atlantic, traversable only during the most unforgiving of storms. After failed voyages, squandering most of my inheritance and several good seamen's lives, nearly perishing more than once myself as a result, I was ecstatic to have finally reached what I wished so dearly to be those fabled lands thought in legend to contain people who are said to have transcended death itself. And yet, our immediate surroundings inspire little but dread within me. I assumed defeating death would produce a lush landscape of thriving life, existing blissfully and in perfect natural harmony. However, all we could see for miles and endless miles inland was naught but a wasteland of scraggly brownish-yellow grass and a scant grouping of leafless, jagged trees beneath a gloomy sky. The land itself seemed to go onwards towards infinity, stretching into a vast, misty steppe with no visible end in sight. I hoped with all my heart that I had not once again been mistaken in my calculations, as another failure would surely have left me all but desolate once I found myself back on familiar, civilized soil. I beckoned the whaley sailors forth after helping to gather supplies for the journey, of which I had no idea how long it may take, and we all lugged what we could onto a nondescript swathe of nothing grass before us. It crumbled beneath our boot heels, disintegrating into ash. As such, markers that would lead us back to our ship proved entirely unnecessary, and a portion of our firewood load was abandoned along the way due to the evenness of the still temperature climate. The footsteps we left behind, scorched black as if our souls were ablaze, proven to be all the more distinguishable even from a distance. The land's unpredicted peculiarities disturbed me. I knew I mustn't let the others know how truly out of depth I really was, lest they lose faith in my expertise and turn mutinous. They were here, somewhere, and we would find them, learn their secrets that the whole world might benefit from such great knowledge. Oh, how naive I was. We walked for an incalculable long stretch of time, each man leaving his trail of jet-black boot prints behind him, burned into the death beneath. The air waved and sparked on the peripherals of my vision, sending me into an anxious spiral of self-doubt. Indeed, this place was clearly at least preternatural, its lifeless composition chomping at the nerves and making one sick with the desperate urge to flee, an urge, it was clear, which affected each of us present. Flee, however, we did not. We pushed onwards as a group, and while no real words were exchanged for the moment we stepped foot on the shore, it was as if each man knew, all to himself, of the significance of this endeavor, that we were on the cusp of something previously seen by very few before us. To my sudden delight, I spotted a rather striking swab of vibrant purple cresting a hill on the otherwise flat landscape. My words failed to bring themselves to fruition, falling into nothingness beyond my lips, and yet my intent translated through some other unknown means, and the crew's attention was drawn collectively towards the object of my pointing finger. The others apparently couldn't speak either, but as if of one mind, we changed course and headed towards a small hill. Still living flowers akin to strange alien bluebells were the source of the color, the only such splash apparently left in all the land, and I implored the men wordlessly not to touch them. None did, struck with a sort of reverence that one feels when face to face with the only modicum of thriving life in a sea of decay. Pacing ever so carefully through the flowers underfoot, urging the group to stay at the bottom so not to disturb the flora more than need be, I climbed the hill, taking all of a minute. At the top, I felt higher than God himself. I saw my effort repaid tenfold before my eyes. The natives, the legendary Shintaki people, sat at least 100 in number in neat, awaiting rows staring me dead from down below. All of similar basic height and complexion, and garbed in identical flower brown robes, all fixed with some stock, emotionless expression. Behind them lay their surprisingly crude settlement, wooden shacks adorned with a massive large arrangement of concentric circles constructed using black and white rocks. The design inherently primitive, but the scene emitted a strange but very clear power just the same, as if the building served not only as living space but as part of some grand occult display as well. I could tell these people were also completely wordless, as we had been, as is the case for all creatures which inhabit the silent lands of Shizna. However, their minds were abuzz in communication, an ethereal line of shared thoughts in which I had momentarily breached, as I stared paralyzed looking over at the masked stone-faced countenance of the locals. The return look, suddenly becoming a furious glare, let me know where I stood in their eye at that moment. We were invaders, and would be treated as such. We were all quite unable to move until compelled to submit to the will of the Shintak. I watched on from the hilltop as the crew were each led to and then bound amongst the center of those circles, of which were likely to be visible from the edge of space in their grand scale. And each man seemed to them merge with the rocks, becoming translucent and monstrously indistinguishable from their former natural appearance. They outwardly seemed almost unaware of the change, as if already dead, and yet they were so clearly and justly suffering. The thoughts of the Shintak becoming unpenetrable beyond a collective din of reveille as I looked upon my fallen friends. I could hear their manic cries of terror rip silently through the windless landscape as their congealed forms began to radiate a pulsing purple luster from within. I might have stood there for centuries, or maybe just an hour or two, but when it was finally all over and the men on the rocks were no longer men, and their transformation was complete, sucked into the land eternally, I was summoned to the bottom of the hill. The Shintak joined me there, lined in their strange formations, where in one voice I was thanked for presenting such a bountiful harvest to the immortal kin of the Shinnaz. They offered me what I was in search of, their power, to use as my own, but with a dreadful condition. It was one which I shamefully and remorsefully took up within a second thought. Over 50 years have passed since my return home. I have traveled extensively by boat and rail. My preaching has accumulated a party of followers thrice the size of my former crew, all clamoring to obtain a face as ageless as mine. Enlisting their combined wealth, a new ship awaits us on the dock upon which we shall set sail once more for the fabled Shinaz steppe. There is a little guilt remaining in my soul, if such a thing remains within me after what I have become, although, at the end of it all, who could possibly say no to forever? When my wife discovered the school bags in our basement, I had to tell her what really happened to the missing children of our town. "They're actually very nice," my wife said as she checked the school bags that I had crafted from the skin of those children. Welcome to the facility by Mr. Potato II. Hey there, if you're reading this, you're probably on tour of our facility. Welcome. Our project is to secure, contain, and protect, as you will learn in this awesome experience. Before you start the tour, though, there are some important rules to acknowledge and learn. 1. Do not be afraid to ask questions. This tour, above all, is meant to educate and encourage learning, and our tour guide will be happy to answer any questions about our project. 2. Entering the facility is at one's own risk, and the Foundation will not take any liability for any incident of body or psychological harm to the individual, including injuries, deterioration of mental health, and death. 3. The Foundation reserves the right to use any means necessary to prevent containment breaches, including harming the individual. 4. If any of the rules lack proper punctuation, have bad grammar, or seem misplaced, do not trust them. Multiple SCPs have the ability to edit documents, and a few of them want you well. 5. Never stray away from the tour group. The facility is secure, and we will not ensure personal safety when leaving the tour group without permission. When needing to go to the bathroom or other similar situations, always ask permission from your group's tour guide and tag along with a guard. The facility is not responsible for any situation transpiring by breaking this rule. 6. When visiting SCP-999, the Tickle Monster, be gentle and kind, and do not, under any circumstance, let it ingest caffeine, including cola drinks. Staff do not take kindly to mistreatments of SCP-999. 7. At lunch break, the use of SCP-294, the coffee vending machine, is permitted as long as you follow proper safety protocols. Examples of safety protocols not being followed are inputting a cup of bob or antimatter into the machine. Examples of safety protocols being followed are inputting Fanta or black coffee with 2 sugars. SCP-294 is heavily guarded all the time, and the guards will not take lightly to ignoring safety precautions. 8. At the viewing station, please skip the SCP-096 station. The AI face detector sensor is not currently working. Any visitor ignoring this rule will promptly be shot and killed by the facility guards to prevent a containment breach. 9. Any sightings of SCP-1048, Teddy, and/or its clones, must promptly be reported to the facility guards. Any advances by Teddy, alone or not, are to be ignored, and the most advisable response is to run or otherwise quickly escape the situation. No matter what, do not act threatening towards Teddy or his replicants. Teddy will try to trick you. 10. The Foundation is not liable to harms caused to individuals during containment breaches. 10-1. Should a containment breach occur during the tour, stay with your assigned tour group. Your tour guide always knows best. Do not, under any circumstance, leave the tour group without explicit permission given to you by the tour guide. 10-2. Should you separate from your tour group during the containment breach, follow these steps. 10-2-1. Find an isolated room with a lockable door. Keep the lights off and stay silent. 10-2-2. Never lose your assigned bag. Inside are 3 items: a loaded pistol, an unaliving pill, and a walkie-talkie. 10-2-3. A general rule: if you encounter any anomalous entities during a containment breach, you shoot them 2 times with the pistol. If they budge, shoot them again or run. If they do not budge, either take your pill or aim the pistol at your temple and fire. Trust me, it's better that way. 10-2-4. If the entity looks like an old man or can walk through walls, do not waste any bullets. Instead, off yourself immediately. Dying quickly is infinitely better than your fate he will give you if you resist. 10-2-5. Should you hear the cries of a loved one outside, do not investigate. Your loved ones are not here. They are not in danger. This is most probably SCP-939. 10-2-6. If you hear the voice of your tour guide outside, you've found your group again and you are safe. Exit the room and group up with them. 10-3-7. If you hear any creatures outside, please inform the security guards by using your assigned walkie-talkie. Speak loudly and clearly. 10-2-8. When a containment breach occurs, ceiling lights will turn from white to red. When the colors turn back to white, you are safe. Stay inside your hiding spot until a guard finds you. Correction! Shoot the guard. He is not your friend. The breach is still ongoing. After, take his clearance card. Make your way to cell 17 and open it. It's safe inside. 11. There appears to have been a breach on this document by an unknown SCP. It has bolded out fake rules, but to summarize, do not follow rules. Do not listen to them. The Foundation are not who you think they are. The hospital social worker let me know that there was actually a way for my emergency appendectomy to be done for free. My hand shaked a bit when I signed the contract that allowed the team to proceed without anesthesia and live stream the whole thing for profit. True Zombie by Jumble Tumble. It's midnight, I'm alone at home and I can't sleep, so I decide to have a stroll down the street. It's silence, the only sound of wildlife being crickets and other insects chirping together. It was a beautiful night and the sky was clear, and so I decided to stop at the local park. There's a cemetery nearby, yet I'm not bothered until I see it. The moon hung high in the night sky, casting an eerie glow over the desolate yard. A chilling wind whispered through the trees, causing the leaves to rustle in the haunting symphony. It was in this unsettling atmosphere that I found myself frozen in fear, my heart pounding in my chest. Before me stood a mindless corpse, its decaying body swaying slightly in the breeze. Half of its head hung off to the side, revealing a gruesome and gory sight. Its rotting brown blood spilling onto the grass, staining it a deep crimson and causing the worms to wiggle to the surface. The body just stood there, its one remaining eye fixed upon me as if it had no thought but to watch me. The eye, clouded with cataract, seemed to pierce through my soul, sending shivers down my spine. I couldn't tear my gaze away from the grotesque figure standing before me. It was as if time had stopped and the world around me had faded into nothingness. The only thing that existed in that moment was me and the rotting corpse staring at me. I stood there, my mind raced, desperately trying to make sense of this sickening scene. How did this corpse come to be? What sinister forces had brought it to life? Questions swirled in my head, but no answers presented themselves. Fear had grasped my lungs. Every breath was a sharp pain down my throat and in my chest. The wind picked up, carrying with it a putrid stench of decay, the corpse's tattered clothes fluttering in the gusts, revealing more of its decayed flesh. The sight was enough to make bile rise in my throat, but I couldn't look away. It was like watching a lion tear apart a zebra, so grotesque that you want to look away and forget, yet so fascinating you can't look away. Suddenly, a low, guttural growl emitted from the lifeless body. The sound was so disturbing it gave me a headache, freezing me in place and locking my feet to the floor. What was left of the corpse's mouth opened and a sickling gargling escaped its throat. It took a step forward, its movements jerky and unnatural. Its rotting flesh had been holding onto the jaw by a thread before detaching and dropping to the floor. More dark blood flooded and dropped down onto the grass. Panic surged through me, urging me to run to escape this evil, unnatural presence. but my legs refused to move, feeling both solid and like jelly at the same time. The corpse continued its slow, deliberate approach, its one eye fixed upon me. It was like it could see into the depths of my soul, feeding off my terror. With every step it took, you could hear the bones and joints popping and crackling against each other, like a dislocated knee being bent constantly. The air grew thick with an oppressive smell of rot suffocating me. I could feel the weight of evil pressing down upon me, threatening to consume me whole. As the corpse drew closer, I could see its mushy red features in greater detail. Its flesh was molted and rotting, maggots wiggling within the open wounds. The stench of death grew stronger, overpowering my senses. I could taste the metallic tang of blood on my tongue mingling with the vomit rising in my throat. Just as the corpse reached out its decaying hand, a surge of adrenaline coursed through my veins. A primal scream of fear, I broke free from my paralysis and stumbled backwards, tripping over my own feet. I scrambled to my hands and knees, my heart pounding in my ears. I got up and ran as fast as my trembling legs would carry me. Behind me, I could hear the corpse's unearthly crackling steps growing fainter, and the sound of its flesh falling off and dripping onto the concrete fading away. But I dare not look back. I ran until my lungs burned like methyl and my shins were in agonizing pain. Only when I reached the safety of my home did I allow myself to collapse, gasping for breath. That night, as I lay in bed, drenched in a cold sweat, I couldn't shake the image of the mindless corpse from my mind. Its haunting gaze, its decaying form, and the terror it had instilled in me would forever etched into my memory. I knew that I had encountered something beyond the realm of the living, something that would forever haunt my nightmares. It was something sinister, evil, something that shouldn't have ever existed in this mortal realm. To this day, I can smell the flesh, I can hear the joints causing friction against each other, and I can see its blood shimmering in the moonlight. The brown liquid that once was blood stained against its skin. And of course, the way it looked at me with that clouded eye, like a crystal ball reading my demise. As an atheist, I watched as all hell broke loose. 10 seconds before, a voice told everyone that our own religion was the one true religion and we had to defend it. Bedtime Story by OK Programmer 6938. It was a Wednesday, not a significant date by any means, just another Wednesday. That's what I thought anyways, what I thought before everything happened. I live in a nice 2-story home near the beach in a fairly decent neighborhood, but recently there had been a string of kidnappings. Children taken from their beds in the dead of the night. I was drifting in and out of the couch downstairs after a long day of working a physical, demanding job. My son had gone to bed about an hour before, and I was zoning out to the drone of the nightly news. There was a noise upstairs, a soft thump that came just above me. It sounded like my son had fallen out of bed, but the recent reports had made me nervous. I went upstairs and cut into my room, opening the gun safe and pulling out my old Smith & Wesson. I double-checked the drum and quickly drifted towards my son's room. His door was cracked, and I could hear a woman's voice on the other side. Slowly, I pushed the door open to find my wife sitting in bed with my boy. She looked like she had just gotten out of the shower. Her skin shone in the dim light of the moon, like it was still damp, and her hair hung wetly against her head like some sort of inky blanket. She clung tightly to my son as the cold air from her open window sent chills down my spine. My boy sat wide-eyed next to her, both of them fixated on a book. "I think I can," she whispered to him as she flipped the page with a free hand. Her eyes slowly drifted to me as more light fled into the room. She smiled softly at me and crooked a finger. "Come, you read the last page," she cooed sweetly. I raised the gun to the woman and drew back the hammer. "I don't know who or what you are, but my wife died 3 years ago," I stated. The thing pretending to be my wife shrieked back, its gaze now fixed to me. It dropped to the floor, arms and legs far too long to be human, skidding backwards, drifting to the windowsill where it lingered for several minutes before leaping out. I rushed over to my son and wrapped my arms tightly around him, closing my eyes and breathing a deep sigh. "Nanny," I heard his muffled whimper from my chest. "Yeah, buddy," I said, pulling away to look into his eyes. "It's still watching us," he whispered. Slowly my gaze turned to the window. It was still there, whatever it was. Its head barely poking above the bottom of the window, watching us, unblinking. Quickly, I grabbed my gun and leveled it to that thing's forehead, but before I could pull the trigger, it had ducked away. I rushed to the window and poked my head out, and there on the ground it stood, staring up at me. The thing had changed. It now only vaguely resembled my wife. 2 long arms and leg thing, whatever the hell it was, blinked, eyelids closing vertically instead of horizontally. I didn't do anything this time. It was like my body had locked itself in fear. Several long moments later, that creature dropped back down onto all fours and scurried towards the beach. I don't know what the hell I saw that Wednesday night, but I moved away from the coast, bought myself a nice 1-story home in a landlocked state. And even though I'm pretty sure I got away from that thing, I never leave my door or windows unlocked. I rushed upstairs to the baby's room the moment I saw the intruder on the monitor. But it wasn't until I entered the freezing cold room with the gaping window and empty crib that I remembered the camera has a 5-second delay. And with that, our time together is coming to an end. First, I'd like to thank my patrons and members who help support the channel. You guys are awesome as always. Also, to remind you that if you have a story, whether true or fiction, and you'd like me to think about narrating it, you can submit it in 3 different ways: through my subreddit, through my website, and through email. Last but never least, I'd like to thank all the writers who let me read their stories this evening. You all did an amazing job bringing your own kind of horror to the pages. We had 2 horror rules, one very short and sweet about things coming out of the corner of your eye and how you should be careful, to one about a facility that just doesn't care if you survive in the end. And then we have a bedtime story being read by a mother, but it's not what you think, and does explain why all those children have been taken recently. To a woman, well, finding a real true zombie and just having to run away. And lastly, an island that seems dead and there are people on it that stay alive forever. It makes me wonder, do they sacrifice their own island to stay alive as well? Because it's only that small portion that seems okay. Just a thought I had while I was reading it. Now, If you enjoyed this video, hit that like button and make sure it feels it. If you're new, please subscribe and turn that pretty little bell to all notifications. And please leave me a comment. Tell me which story was your favorite, what you like in the future, stuff like that. And if you're on the podcast and on a platform that allows it, please leave me a review. And if you're on Spotify, I have questions that you can answer if you like. And of course, whether you're listening on the podcast or on YouTube, please share this with anyone who might enjoy it. It really helps it get out to new ears and find people who just enjoy my content as well. If you'd like to get early access and a few other bonuses, I do have Patreon and memberships as well. And if you'd like to do a one-time donation, you can do Super Thanks, PayPal, or Buy Me a Coffee as well. And of course, none of this is expected, just always appreciate it, guys. All those links, including the ones to submit your stories, are in the description box / show notes for you guys. But as always, guys, thank you so much for watching and listening. It always has and always will mean the world to me. Sleep tight and don't let 42 bite.